On the 29th of May, 1953, Tenzing Norgay and Edmund Hillary became the first humans to stand on the summit of Everest. This momentous human first was also a momentous human last, the last major world news item to be delivered by runner. A courier traveled by foot to the nearest town, from which the information was later telegraphed to Kathmandu and onwards. Sir John Hunt, leader of that expedition and author of the hugely popular account The Ascent of Everest, wrote that his team had climbed Everest because it was an opportunity to enter the unknown. This was more than mere mysticism. The idea that mountaineers had great contributions to make to the advancement of knowledge was shared by many mountaineering writers at the time of the first ascent. Enthusiasts argued that mountaineering was essential for progress in science because so much of the Earth's surface was still uncharted, and only great climbers could reach these places in order to report on them. These days, Everest is anything but unknown, so commercialized that it's become symbolic of a world used up by humans, crawling with amateur adventurers who can afford it, and littered with the corpses of those who don't make it down. In recent years, reports from the climbing season are less about climbing achievements and more about crowds causing bottlenecks and critical levels of trash, resulting in the mountain's new nickname, Mount Trashmore. Another new favorite motif in these reports is that of climbers ignoring other climbers who are struggling, and indeed sometimes actually dying, on the way to or from the summit. How we navigate mountains as a symbolic or semiotic terrain depends on the history we tell of how humans arrived at this point. Recent work by historians tends to focus on climbing as a distinctly European event, a sort of symptom of European modernity. These historians convincingly establish that since the Italian poet Petrarch stood on the summit of Mont Ventoux sometime in the mid-1300s, the first recorded person to ascend a mountain just to see the view from the top, there's been something like a single uniform history of mountaineering, closely following and mirroring that of the modern era. And indeed, by the end of the 18th century, mountains and mountaineers were at the center of many of the developments historians take to be quintessential symptoms of the European modern spirit, like colonial knowledge production, think Alexander von Humboldt, and the new discipline of aesthetics, think Immanuel Kant. The story here is one of continuity over time and space, with climbers summiting higher and higher peaks, moving eastward from Europe to Asia. In this framework, Everest is just another mountain, the highest one. But there's another way to tell the story. The practice as we know it today began not several centuries, but exactly a century ago with the British Himalayan expeditions. It was actually the Everest Reconnaissance Expedition of 1921, ordered by the British Alpine Club and the Royal Geographical Society, and later known simply as George Mallory's first expedition, that changed the game by inaugurating a culture of celebrity climbers and celebrity mountains. By declaring the summit of Everest, the upper limit of the world, possible, that expedition infused climbing with new life. The 8,000ers, or the peaks higher than 8,000 meters, became the ultimate transnational and transcultural theater for life on the edge, the limits of human performance, and eventually environmental limits. The 1921 expedition forever changed how climbers and their earthbound publics saw not only the practice of mountaineering, but also more generally what it means to be human, including the role of natural environments in the ongoing creation of culture. The great innovation of the Mallory expeditions was twofold. They discovered a viable route to the summit, roughly the same route on which he and Andrew Irvine would lose their lives 3 years later. But they also changed how humans thought about desire and about the available cultural codes for justifying their desire. When a New York Times reporter asked Mallory, "Why did you want to climb Mount Everest?" "Because it's there." Mallory's cryptic reply became the most loved quote in climbing history.